Guys, so I've played a lot of games in my life, and I was recently thinking about what makes certain games stick out above other games, right? So, if you go to a movie, or you rent a movie, or you go to a baseball game, or you go bowling, or any other sort of entertainment, usually you can expect to pay several dollars for 1 hour of entertainment. And with video games, it's more standard to pay $1 for 1 hour of entertainment. So you might play 60 hours of a video game that you paid $60 for and feel like that was a good deal. Um, but some games, and for me, only three really stick out. World of Warcraft, which I played about 8,000 hours of. Europa Universalis 4, which I played about 2,000 hours of, and StarCraft 2, which I played somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 hours of. Are like the top three, and then number four is like the Total War games that I only played like 160. So like number four is nowhere near number three. So those three games stand out to like an order of magnitude above other games. Simon, please don't talk to me right now, my friend. And no, you can't have my password. Simon's so cute. So what's different about those games than all the other games that I loved, that I played for, often over 100 hours, but that didn't last forever and ever and ever? So I started writing down all the things that make games fun, right? Leveling is something that everyone knows. It's always fun to get more stuff in order to help you to more quickly get more stuff. And like it's like a constant loop, right? You get a better item, and now you can kill a harder boss, and then you can get a better item from that boss that helps you kill, and this is leveling, right? It's fun, but that's not common amongst those three things, right? There's no leveling in EU4, there's no leveling in StarCraft, there's only leveling in World of Warcraft. So that must not be the silver bullet that ties them together, right? Novelty, learning new stuff. When a game is new, that's the most fun time. I love complicated games, and all three of those games are complicated, and there's a lot of stuff to learn, but I probably learned everything I'll ever need to know about World of Warcraft within maybe 60 or 70 hours, and same for StarCraft. Like, I wasn't learning new stuff as far as StarCraft is concerned after the first 60 or 70 hours. As far as game mechanics go, I mean, you learn new builds, but all of the builds fit within the constructs that you've already figured out. So the novelty of the games really wears off after about 60 hours. And that's why the original StarCraft campaign was something that I played all the way through, and it was so much fun, because I was still in that novelty phase where basically anything having to do with the game is fun. Whereas the expansion campaign was terrible, not because it was actually any worse, but just because the novelty had worn off. And so you didn't have that fresh, out the box feel going for you. So novelty is also not our silver bullet, right? All three games had lots of learning, and I liked that about them. That's what initially drew me to them, but that's not what made them last forever. Randomness. So the idea that you can see something new every time you play the game, and you're not just going in and seeing a constructed level. And this is important because, for example, in World of Warcraft, if someone designs a quest and you do that quest, now you're done. And the guy spent 60 hours designing the quest, and you spent an hour having fun on the quest, but now you're done. So every hour you spend playing the game takes 60 hours for the programmer to have made you something new to experience. And that is not a good design, idea, because if nothing is randomized, if everything it requires like a dude to have made it for you, then it's going to take a heck of a long time to make a game that lasts any amount of time. So the idea of randomness each time you play, like random instances or random difficulty of things, or like putting 5 people together. And World of Warcraft relies on this a lot, putting different people together each time you go out, so that the different people have different strengths and weaknesses and skills and whatever, adds an element of randomness to the game. And all three of those games do definitely share a very large element of randomness. So that does seem to be one of the key factors that keeps games playable for a long time, right? In StarCraft, you got different maps all the time, and you play on a random map each time, and you play against a random opponent, and your opponent's going to do a different strategy, and so every game is unique. In World of Warcraft, same thing. You group with different people, you get different things coming out that are going to be important on that run. And same with the U4, right? There's lots of randomness about, you can end up with France under personal union to Britain or something. Like, that's totally different than a game in which France just completely gets full sieged by Burgundy in the early game. So there's a lot of randomness to all three games, and that does seem to be a really important factor. Community. Now, StarCraft, I did kind of when I stopped being able to hang with Nick and play with Nick. Although I did stop before Nick, it's like if Nick and Catrock hadn't been consistently playing StarCraft, I would have stopped like a year before I stopped. So community is important, and same with World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft held my attention personally for a really long time, but mostly because I had a lot of friends who also played it, and so we could talk about it to each other and play with each other and that kind of stuff. And EU4 in the same sense, I don't know that I'd still have played EU4 past like 800 hours or whatever if I didn't have a community to go to and be like, hey, I did this, and oh, you did that, and you know, let's be doing the same thing and comparing to each other and stuff. So community, I think, is a big element that's shared between them, and a lot of games don't have any community at all, or like even if they do, like if they try to have a community, there's just no point in it. You know, like if you take, for example, the Total War games, even though they're very similar to the EU4 games, people don't get excited about, you know, there are 5 clans you can play, and you're basically guaranteed to win with any of the 5 as long as you put enough hours in. So there's no, you go to a bunch of people and be like, hey, I figured out how to win with this one of the 5. No, everyone did eventually, right? You're gonna win eventually if you just keep trying. So it's a lot less, you know, sexy community-wise, even though it is probably the game I played for the 4th most number of hours. Challenge, now this is kind of a cheap one. The number 5 and number 6 go together, and this, I think, is the key. All 3 of these games create a dynamic challenge with what I call juggling, which is unique kind of to these 3 games. Not a lot of the other games that I really enjoyed did this. When I say juggling, you can imagine when you throw a ball up in the air, it's really easy to catch that ball. And you throw another ball and you catch the ball, and you throw another ball and you catch the ball. And if you throw it too far over here, you can kind of react and go pick it up, but it costs you a little bit of time. And it's still pretty easy with one ball, but once you add another ball and another ball and another ball, and each of them has to be thrown the perfect way and caught the perfect way, then that's what makes juggling kind of endlessly challenging and entertaining compared to just throwing one ball up and down. So in World of Warcraft senses, you have the global cooldown and the cooldown timers and various abilities with different cooldowns. So imagine you have an ability you have to use every 2 seconds and another ability you have to use every 3 seconds. So first you use ability 1, then you use ability 2, and then ability 1 is ready to be used again, but ability 2 is blocking ability 1 from being used at the perfect time. But if you use 3 first, or 2 first and then 1, you can actually chain them better, but only for a short, you know. So there's these kind of like rotations where you can calculate the perfect, you know, order in which to use your abilities to waste the least amount of time. And that's, to me, that's kind of like what I'm talking about with juggling. Like, you have things where if you're too far off on the left, then you get penalized. You know, like I waited too long before using this ability. And if you're too far off on the right, like I didn't wait too long to use this ability, but I skipped other abilities in order to use this ability right when I wanted to, then you're also penalized. And think of it in StarCraft 2 terms as well, like with making workers as a Terran, or making Marines, or queuing up siege tanks or whatever. You're allowed to queue up multiple units, but doing so takes some of the money you could have spent on something else and reserves it. But if you don't queue up units, then every cycle of unit creation, you're missing a certain amount of time, and that time is gone forever, where that building was idle, and it could have been making a unit, and it wasn't because you decided to err on this side. But either way, whether you err on the side of the left or the side of the right, you're penalized a little bit. So it's impossible to be perfect, is the point. The way that they set up both of those games is such that even like an AI that was programmed to do everything exactly the best way couldn't be perfect. It would always be better to, it would possible to do a tiny bit better. So like it's like dynamic complexity, I guess, is what Nick called it. The idea that it's impossible to really know, because there's trade-offs whether you go on the left or on the right. It's impossible to know really what an ideal build is. You can have 2 ideal builds in StarCraft that produce kind of identical results, but one of them gets you a quicker scout and one of them gets you an extra marine or something, you know, like, and those aren't, one is not better than the other. They're different in different situations, and that kind of creates that dynamic sort of dynamic complexity or whatever. And EU4 has the exact same thing, where like EU4, Europa Universalis 4 is an alternate history simulator. which is very similar to Civilization, which is very similar to the Total War series, which is very similar to, I mean, Risk is like a dumbed down version of this. Like, you have countries, and those countries make alliances and fight other countries, and each country has a certain amount of troops that they get out every month, and a certain amount of money they get to spend on troops, and so on and so forth. So it could have been made in a way that was really samey and similar. And instead, they took this dynamic complexity element from StarCraft and from World of Warcraft, and they put it into a game that genre-wise just doesn't do that. Like, Civilization and the Total War series are great games, and I played a bunch of them, but they don't at all try to do that. They don't try to have you thinking about four things at once and making trade-offs between those four things in such a way that it's impossible to do it, in quotes, perfectly, right? Because you could get a little bit more of one thing in exchange for a little bit less of something else, and so on and so forth. So I think it's crazy that they just happened to know how to make fun games. And you can make any genre of any game fun with this concept, you know? Give me a bar and tell me if the bar is ever empty, then I lose something. And if the bar is ever full, then I lose something. And the closer to the middle it is, the better I'm going to do, right? That's one bar. And then give me another bar, an unrelated bar, and say if it ever gets full, you get penalized. If it ever gets empty, you get penalized. And the closer it is to the middle, the more of an advantage you get in another category. And then give me a third bar, and a fourth bar, and a fifth bar. If I have 5 bars and I have to try to keep them all as close as I can to the middle, and every once in a while, oops, I let that bar get out too far to the right, so I get whacked. That's, to me, what at least allows me to play these types of games for over 1,000 hours, right? No game has come close that didn't have that aspect with I guess, for lack of a better term, several bars that need to be kept right in the middle. And I think it's cool that there are three different genres. You got real-time strategy, grand strategy, and RPG, basically. And the game itself, like the story you tell of a game, like if I was going to tell you about a great game of Civilization that I played, I'd be like, I was this nation, I fought that nation, I made an alliance with this third nation, and I backstabbed this fourth nation, and I realized I had enough troops in here to attack that. And I would talk about the soldiers and when I moved them and who I attacked and who I allied. I wouldn't talk about the underlying mechanics. And if I told you a story about an EU4 game, it would sound like I was describing a Civilization game, right? I would talk about, this was my nation, it got bigger, I allied with these people, I fought against those people, I backstabbed these people. I would use the exact same words and say the exact same things. But Civilization doesn't make me juggle these bars, and EU4 does. So even though from a high level their stories are identical, I played Civilization 4 for maybe 120 hours, and I played EU4 for 1,740 hours, like almost 2,000 hours now. It's a huge deal. And it's hard to really put your finger on, and I kind of had this epiphany that, hey, that's why this one is better than that one. And I wanted to share. So that's my story, and Merry Christmas. Make your games have